going on, guys? It's Yugi Bros, and today we're actually bringing back the old top 5 formatted videos. I wanted to go over my top 5 wildcards of this new Streets of Battle City box, and by wildcards I mean potentially they could be good, but potentially they may not be. Like, you read them and you're like, oh, in theory that could be crazy, but it also could just fall flat on its face. So kicking it off, we're going to start off with Ledger of Legerdemain. I know a lot of people are probably on the same bandwagon here, and that's why I put it in the thumbnail. It reads, banish 3 cards from the top of your deck face down. During your third standby phase after this card's activation, add all 3 to your hand, and you can only activate 1 per turn. So it's like triple Goldstark, but for the top 3, you don't know what they're going to be, and if you conveniently need one of those 3 pieces, well, too bad, you have to wait 3 turns. But the other downside is the fact that you have to wait 3 turns. The third standby after activation, it's just, that's so long. And I understand in Speed Duels this has a much better chance to resolve than in something like normal Yu-Gi-Oh! My problem with it is the fact that, like, you have to wait that long, and depending on what your strategy is, it could potentially take a long time. Now, it's not to go without saying that, like, if this does resolve, you're just getting 3 cards for free, and like in the right deck, I'm sure that's all that's gonna matter. In a stall deck in general, you don't tend to care, you know, so it's something like, well, if you last till the 3rd turn, then you're adding a bunch of advantage, and so hopefully that's good on that front. But I don't know, it's tough. It's definitely like, when it got revealed at first, I was like, oh my god, this is finally going to be a relevant card for the first time ever. And then the more you think about it, the more you're like, but what do I play it in? It's going to be rough. But, you know, it's not to go without saying that somebody will probably try and break this, so I'm not against it for sure. The next card on the list is Pineapple Blast. Now, this is a card, you read it, and you're like, oh, this is just the, what I say in my video. It's the watered-down version of Weighbridge, right? The difference is, instead of just flipping it and your opponent destroying down to the number of monsters you have, this only triggers when you normal summon a monster. And that's the problem, right? It's a little slow. Again, we're in Speed Duels, so contrary to the name, it's a bit of a slower format. And again, depending on the deck, this could be relevant, right? You destroy down on your opponent's field until they hit the same number of monsters you do. The trick here is that, like, you have to have at least 1 because it's when you normal summon a monster, and the most this is destroying is 2 if they have 3 on the field. So I guess it's not bad in that sense. If you're playing a deck where, you know, you're not expecting a lot of their monsters to be destroyed, I mean, that might be one thing. Another thing is, like, I don't know, this is a good example. If you're doing an Amazoness burn deck with something like Swordswoman, and you're just punching things to, you know, deal the damage, but like they're not dying, maybe this is for that. But again, you kind of want those things to stay on the field so you can keep punching for damage. I don't know, in theory it sounds cool. It's our game's version of, I guess, Torrential Tribute. It's a terrible comparison, but just go with it, right? We don't have a whole lot of ways to destroy things on summons, let alone just destroy things in trap form on something besides, like, attacking. So, again, could have potential, depends on the deck. The other thing I don't like about it is that the opponent chooses which monsters are destroyed. So unfortunately for you, like, if they summon a really big monster and then you flip this, they're going to keep the big one realistically and destroy the little ones. Or something with a really good effect, you know, they'll keep that one and destroy the nons. But I don't know. Well, we'll definitely have to see what we can do with this going forward. The third one, and I love this card from the moment I read it, is Reversible Beetle, right? Level 3 insect flip effects, 11 attack, 15 defense, earth. Says if it's flipped, shuffle this card and any face-up monsters in its column into the decks. Already, I think that's really, really cool, and all of a sudden, Speed Duels cares about columns, and I think that's cool too, because before we never did. I don't even know if Duelingbook had the option to choose columns. They're going to probably have to add it now because of this card, and rightfully so. I'm actually shocked we haven't had a column-based card up to this point. Cyberdark Impact had a bunch of old ones, but this one, like... Don't put a monster in the same column you're attacking. It's kind of crazy because this was never relevant in normal Yu-Gi-Oh! So the only reason you're ever playing around columns in normal Yu-Gi-Oh! Is most of the time due to Mech Knights. There was a stint where you would play around something like Broken Line or Fuse Line, but mostly it's just Mech Knights. But we've never had an issue where putting something in the same column to attack it becomes a relevant problem. And this card could actually make that be a thing, and I really like that. The other effect it has, if it's normal or special summon, change this card and any monsters in its column to face down defense. This is even harder to play around because no matter what column your monster is in, they're going to normal this to the same column, realistically, and then flip your thing face down. And it's just more like Book of Moons. I don't know, it seems very interesting. What I also love is that because it then flips both face down, you can then flip it in a later spot, and then it just shuffles the thing. So you can almost set up exactly what you want to shuffle back depending on where in the game you are. And I think of all 5, this is my favorite wild card, because I don't know, I just think this card could be actually really, really cool. Again, it comes down to what you're playing it in and how you're utilizing it, as most wild card cards are. But I don't know, I think this card is definitely worth investing time and interest into for sure. The next one on the list is Magical Arm Shield. Now, when this was first revealed, I was like, oh, finally we get something in this game that can, you know, besides a widespread ruin type thing. When your opponent declares an attack while you control a monster. So one downside is you have to have a monster and they have to have a monster, but that's not really a downside. Target one face-up monster your opponent controls except the attacking monster. That's the problem. They have to have at least 2 for this to be relevant, except the attacking monster. So unfortunately, yeah, they're going to have the second one there. Take control of that target until the end of the battle phase. And if you do, it is attacked instead and you proceed to damage calculation. So let's say they have a Blue Eyes and a Summon Skull on their field, and you just have whatever monster you have. They attack with the Blue Eyes or the Summon Skull. You target the opposite, take control of it, and now whatever they're attacking with is forced to attack the other one that you took control of. That's really good, because not only are they realistically hopefully going to take damage here, the bigger thing is that you've outed one of their 2 monsters. The only thing that I argue with this is just like, why would you not just play Widespread Ruin, right? If Widespread Ruin is on a future ban list, then maybe that's the reason you bring this card in. Also, just more ways to out your opponent's things are always nice. But again, the problem is they have to have 2 or more monsters for this to be relevant, and if any point anyone sees you playing this, they're just going to realistically only ever put up 1 monster. Now, the upside, they'll only ever put up 1 monster, like I just said. It's kind of like the argument with Mirror Force. For the longest time, you could play Mirror Force in a deck and then side it out, but the fear of Mirror Force would always be looming for the opponent, so they wouldn't always put all their monsters in attack mode, or they wouldn't put as many monsters on the field into attack position during their battle phase to try and play around the Mirror Force. And it was kind of like this mind game you could play. If they see Magical Arm Shield, they could arguably just only swing or only put up 1 monster in the battle phase, but guys, that's crazy. If you're stunning your opponent's only 1 monster, and then because we don't have a main phase 2 in the speed duels, it's not like main 2 they could just drop something else on the field. They're gonna have to deal with the repercussions of not having multiple. So in theory, it has the ability to be really good. Again, that's how the wild cards work. In theory, this card could be crazy, but until it actually starts seeing consistent play, I'll save judgment for that. The last one on this list is Malice Dispersion. Now this is cool. This card hasn't been reprinted since I think Dark Revelations, which was an eon ago at this point. This is a quick play spell that says discard 1 card from your hand, destroy all face-up continuous traps. So this is like the spell equivalent of Fairy Wind. Fairy Wind destroys all face-up spell and traps on the field. This is only face-up continuous traps, but burn decks be damned is what I'm trying to get to, right? This is not only a hilarious out to burn decks, it's also a spell so you can do it on your turn. It's also a quick play so you can do it in the battle phase. So if they flip like Zoma or something in the battle phase, you could be like, yeah, that's fine. Malice Dispersion. The downside is you have to discard a card. The other downside is that it doesn't destroy continuous spells. Now, again, against burn decks, that's usually not a problem. So I think this card is fine where it is. But to the same token, being only continuous traps can be relevant. Now, this is another controversial option. You could play it against Crystal Beasts and it would hit something like the Conclave. The problem is it's not going to hit the Crystal Beasts themselves, so they'll still be there in the small trap zones for the opponent to use for future effects. Unless you're going for game, you know, something like that. But, again, in theory, card could be crazy, and the fact that it's a continuous spell, I feel like definitely gives it its edge here to be relevant. It's just, what are you going to use it against and where? Definitely, probably you'll see play in the side deck, depending on what the format shapes up to be. But if there are any continuous trap cards in the game, this is definitely a card to play. Another one is Birthright is new in this game, and I don't know how prevalent that'll be, but with normal monster decks, it is strictly Call of the Haunted, so this can out that as well. But anyways, guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below of my top 5 wild cards. Did I miss any? If so, please leave them down there. I would love to have the conversation. It's very interesting. I think the Streets of Battle City box is pretty awesome for what it does for the game, and definitely bolsters a lot of decks that beforehand couldn't really compete. But of course, we'll have to save those for future videos and duel videos alike. So until then, I'll see you guys in the next video.
For more amazing speed duel content, subscribe to Yugi Bros. It's time to duel!